No, oh wait, no, my criminal records, I think all.
Again, it's Ian Party, 20 Lake Road. A giant cell tower will be in Webster for a long, long time. Longer than most of us will be. Which location provides the best balance of better cell service while also protecting the Lake Road Scenic Byway and Webster property owners? Blue Sky Horizon is now pushing for the site at 833 Lake Road. But Blue Sky Horizon is also considered the Kiwanis site on Pellett Road. The Kiwanis site meets everyone's objectives in that it eliminates the Lake Road Scenic Byway visual blight, has a much less negative dollar impact on property values. It has a much better natural treescaping screening effect. They have a willing landlord. Yet it's been identified to be within the feasibility area that Blue Sky Horizon themselves listed in their paperwork. Furthermore, it's only 800 yards south of the proposed Lake Road site. So why did the Kiwanis site suddenly drop off the radar for Blue Sky Horizon? Well, they subsequently reached an agreement with a Lake Road property owner for a site that they prefer. But I understand that. Lake Road is easier for them, so bye-bye Kiwanis. In their original submission, Blue Sky Horizon explained away the Kiwanis site by claiming it's too far south, even though it's only 800 yards south of the proposed Lake Road site. The submission from Blue Sky Horizon had no written reports, no objective analysis. Despite numerous requests, no unbiased proof whatsoever has been provided. However, the town board repeatedly assured us, don't worry, there will be due diligence, and the board will thoroughly investigate Blue Sky Horizon's claims. Now, as a CPA, I'm familiar with due diligence and understand it requires a review of substantive and meaningful evidence to support a claim. You can't make an informed decision without it. So when I finally saw today Blue Sky Horizon's so-called response about the Kiwanis site, I was shocked to see there's no evidence. They simply said effectively, please refer to our original submission. No proof, no studies, no reports or technical analysis, nothing. If Blue Sky Horizon really did a technical analysis or a study, can't they just print a copy and send it to the board? Why didn't they? I believe the answer is because they never did any technical analysis. They want Lake Road, end of story. Now please hurry up and approve our tower where we want it. It seems that perhaps Blue Sky Horizon figures they can just kind of ram this thing through. Hey, just another small town board with some local yokels, no problem. Just put together the boilerplate template, throw in some pretty graphics, tweak it a little bit, and we'll get what we want. So that's where we are right now. Blue Sky Horizon has refused to provide, or more likely does not have, any substantive evidence to document specifically why the Kiwanis site is supposedly not feasible. They just say, refer to our original paperwork. Well, I've gone through the original paperwork a few times, and here's what they said. This location was ruled out by the Verizon wireless engineer for being too far south. That's all. No studies, no reports, no documentation, just a self-serving assertion. So, I am hoping that the town board will honor its pledge to actually require Blue Sky Horizon to provide real, objective evidence, if there is any, that the Kiwanis site truly is technically not feasible. And I would like to have them to do that before making any final decision. So that leaves the question, will there be real due diligence on this question of a better alternative site to the proposed Lake Road location. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Okay, is there anybody else that would like to take the podium tonight for any particular reason?
Mr. Supervisor, when we come to the cell tower hearing, is that the opportunity to present, or is it not?
Yeah, because actually, what will happen...
I'm not sure how you handle it.
Is when we go to those resolutions, what I usually do is say, okay, does the town board have any comments or questions before I make a motion? Now, if the town board has questions or comments that are of technical nature, I would certainly hope that the people that are here, such as yourself, is that Mike right there?
Yes.
Would,
But that's only in reaction to questions. I'd like the opportunity to present. So if now is the time, we'll do it now, or if you want to hold it till then.
it is not, because I want to make sure, and Andy is, I like this guy, man. This is not a public hearing tonight on the cell tower.
Okay, so I do want to be able to respond to those issues.
Well, you have every right in the world to take 5 minutes up there.
That's what I'm asking. Is now the time, or is, okay.
Go right ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, good evening, Robert Bergdorf, law firm Nixon Peabody, here tonight on behalf of Verizon Wireless, and also with me for the record is Jackie Barlotta, project manager, and Mike Crosby, the RF engineer. This application was submitted June 9th. Extensive information was included with that application, which explains, and as was again verbally explained at the last meeting 2 weeks ago, why there's limited flexibility as to where these cells can be placed, the search area parameters, why the Crown Tower site and the Kiwanis site do not work, and they're virtually the same spots. And we've had a number of comments at the last meeting saying that we need to just go somewhere else. We've invited alternate suggestions from the town and from the public. None have been offered in the last 2 weeks. None have been offered since June 9th. We have explored, and would have explored, any other alternates had they been offered. And I want to go to Mr. Opar's comments about the Kiwanis site. It is entirely factually inaccurate to say that the materials do not show that it works. It is entirely factually inaccurate to say that there are no studies and no evidence submitted. He pulled one sentence out of the site selection analysis where it said it's too far south. But what he didn't say is he did not refer back to Exhibit E, which goes into great length about why the Kiwanis site doesn't work. And 800 yards is a half mile. And it was explained at the last meeting, a half mile is too far south for the reasons set forth in extreme detail in Exhibit E. In fact, the Kiwanis site is extremely close to the Crown site. And the Kiwanis site works. And it's so close to the Crown site, it's one Crown Tower. And what I don't understand is this conspiracy theory that Verizon Wireless is here to ram a site through because, for some reason, there is no hidden agenda. We don't care where we are. We could care less as long as it works from our standpoint without unreasonable cost and unreasonable delay. At 2:22 today, I got an email from the town asking for some additional information. I want to respond to that. To start, and I want to note for the record that the FCC shot clock says if the town believes any information is missing, it has 10 days from the application submission, that would be June 19th, that is the deadline, to ask for that. So by responding tonight, I want to make it clear we are not waiving any rights under the federal shot clock. Shot clock also requires that this approval process be concluded with a deadline of 150 days from the application. That's November 9th. It's only about 20 days or so. So I'm happy to respond to that. I don't want to waive any of the rights under federal law. And I'm also noting for the record, and as noted in detail in Exhibit C of the application, that the usual site plan standards, the usual special permit standards, and the usual height variance standards do not apply here. Instead, the New York State Public Utility Standard applies, and a site that works must be approved. And we don't care where it is. I can't say that enough. We don't care as long as it works without unreasonable cost and unreasonable delay, and that's the overlay of some of the federal laws. We cannot go away. We must get service here. So there are 3 issues that were raised in the emails. One was the scenic byway. I don't think you're looking for any information from us, but I will note that proximity to the scenic byway is not a legitimate basis for any kind of denial. I will also note on the scenic byway, and this is from the DOT website talking about the scenic byway, that its purpose is to promote as a tourist destination regional economic development. It is also to guide implementation of the tourist development plan. And it is a strategy for enhancing economic development, job prospects, and entrepreneurial opportunities. Nowhere in there does it suggest that it is to prevent development. And in fact, by drawing tourists, there's all the more need to have effective wireless communications for businesses, emergency services, and individuals in that area. But the scenic byway, apart from that, even though it's not to stop development, is also not a legitimate basis. The second point was Kiwanis. I'm going to go back to that. But the third point was that the board asked for proof that Verizon Wireless approached 370 and 380 Whiting Road and wanted to see the letters and proof that it was done by certified mail and receipts. And I've got both the letter and the receipt, so I'm happy to leave that with the town. So that was item 3, that was item 1. Item 2, we're back for some reason to Kiwanis. And I want the board, I hope the board read Exhibit E, because I'm tired of hearing in the last meeting and at this meeting that there is nothing in there about Kiwanis, because that's absurd. Exhibit E goes in extreme detail about subservice, the RF technology, the limited flexibility, the search area that Mr. Okar says that Kiwanis is in is not in that search area. It is clearly too far south based on materials that we submitted. So I think what I'd like to do, because apparently nobody's reading Exhibit E, I'd like to have Mike Crosby take his 5 minutes, if that's how we're doing this, to come up and explain what's in Exhibit E so the board can see that the Kiwanis Club does not work because it does not reach the primary coverage objectives. If it did, and it was available, without a reasonable cost and reasonable delay, we would be happy to move. We would be happy to go on the Crown Tower if it worked. They don't work. You have to have RF service.
Because that's fine. Go right ahead, Mike. Now or before we get so 6 of this, half dozen of enough.
We're going to get there one way.
That's right.
Well, thanks for hearing us out on this. Again, I'm Mike Crosby, the RF engineer for Verizon Wireless. And I'd like to address a few of those topics associated with the Kiwanis Lodge. And I will point out a few of the locations that they are located at in this document. This is the RF justification document. I believe you refer to as Exhibit C, correct?
E. Exhibit E.
I'm sorry. Exhibit E. So if you were to look at slide 3 or page 3, this is a project need overview slide. In this slide, the second to the last paragraph, it discusses what the objectives are for the site. These objectives are very carefully selected. They're very carefully identified based on deficiencies that exist in existing network. And so you can see in here that the intent of this site, the need for this site, is to improve coverage throughout the portion of the waterfront of the town of Webster, centered along Lake Road from the intersection of Holt Road to Baker Road, and extending approximately 1 mile south along Whiting and Pellett Road. That's important because if we're to entertain alternate locations such as the Kiwanis Lodge or the Crown Tower, which are similarly situated relative to their locations from a north to south standpoint relative to Lake Road, they're approximately ½ mile plus south of where we need to be. A ½ mile is a big deal when you're talking about a site that is only serving a total of 1 mile. That's an enormous distance. Not to mention the fact that it places us a ½ mile closer to our existing fund roads. And as I mentioned in the last meeting, that causes interference. So we actually suffer not only the loss of coverage along Lake Road that's needed, but we also have interference issues. So those were mentioned last time, but I just wanted to repeat that. If we take a look, and just to try to put a little bit of a picture to this information that I'm sharing with you, if you take a look at slide 8, page 8, that's the page that we have the search area identified. And I realized that this particular search area, really what you're looking at is a polygon, as was mentioned in the objective, centered along Lake Road. And you can't see the Quantus Lodge on here, but what, as mentioned, Quantus Lodge is about a half mile south of where we need to be. It's well outside to the south of the search area. Again, the search area is the area that we need to be within in order for this site to work properly. Quantus Lodge and the Crown Tower, again, both similarly situated, and as mentioned, it wouldn't make a ton of sense to build a new tower adjacent to an already existing tower that we've already discounted. Those are both similarly not properly situated in order for us to solve this problem. So that search area helps to shed some light on where the site needs to be. And there's a lot of details in it that talks about how that search area is created. Page 9, you can see that we call out the existing Crown Tower in this slide. And you can see where the existing gap in coverage is. It's shown in the white. You can see the existing coverage we have from Plum Road in red. You can see the existing coverage we have from all the other on-air sites in this portion of the town shown in blue. And so the Quantus location is due north of the Crown Tower that's located off Herman Road. And that's a significant distance. Those both are a significant distance south of this Webster Park site. Now, I mentioned last time, and I'll provide a little bit more detail about why we need to be close to Lake Road. And this is a similar situation we have all the way through Monroe and Wayne counties and actually all along the lake shore. And that's partially because these areas are Canadian border areas relative to our coverage. So I realized, and I've grown up in Webster, so I realized we don't necessarily always think of ourselves as a Canadian border, but the reality is from an RF standpoint, we are. It's only about 35 miles to the Canadian border. Actually, it's not even that. It's only 26 miles from this site to the Canadian border. So that's not a very long distance in the world of RF. And why that's important is because companies like Verizon operate many different bands, many different spectrum bands, frequencies that are licensed by the FCC. Industry Canada regulates the frequencies in Canada. They do not, while Industry Canada and the FCC do work together, they do not regulate each other. So we're bound by agreements the FCC and Industry Canada make to prevent each other, Canada and the U.S., from interfering with each other. This isn't exclusive to the town of Webster. These are rules that apply on a nationwide standard. And there's similar rules in place for Mexico. So these frequencies that are in use are not in use for all the same things on each side of the border. For example, in the United States, the C-band frequencies that we use are being deployed for our wireless networks. In Canada, they're still being used as what are called earth stations. These are uplink portions of satellite links in Canada. In order for us to not interfere with Canada, we have to have what's called safe azimuths. These safe azimuths require us to not be located adjacent to the water, which, as we mentioned before, the water allows the signal to propagate very easily over long distances, whereas areas where there's hills or trees like we have that are inland away from the lake, and I'm talking miles inland, because remember, all Webster is within that border area, the signal is more rapidly degraded. So as we get 35 plus miles away from the border, we get into the area where it's less concerned. But this is an area of high concern. In fact, I took a quick look just to see, what do all of our other sites look like in the area? Are they all similar situated? Because as I mentioned, they were previously. So I looked at 4 Mile Creek, same configuration. The Gannett site, which I know was mentioned previously as a new site that's been recently built along Lake Road, the configuration is going to be installed at that site, same configuration. And when I say same configuration, I'm talking about what we call a T-shape, which is where we have the east sector, the west sector, and the south sector. That leaves a larger null, which is a gap in service to the north. That's in order to prevent any RF signal from traveling to the north. Plum Road site, similar situated. Centenary Shore site, which is on the north side of Lake Road, that's similar situated. Sodas Point is going to be similar situated here on site. So I looked all the way along that Lakeshore Trail, and all those sites, they're all designed the exact same way with these safe azimuths. The safe azimuths, if we deploy the safe azimuths, which is necessary at Kiwanis Lodge or at the Crown Tower on Herman Road, what happens is the distance is too great. Our frequencies, the frequencies we operate, they're degraded over distance and because of foliage, buildings, hills, things like that. Lake Road is a hilly road. The terrain drops off to the lake. The primary objectives that are listed on that page 3 include Lake Road and the residences that are along the lake. It includes other things as well, but those are critical core objectives. If we move to Herman Road at the Crown Tower, or if we move over to Kiwanis Lodge, both of those locations are too far south. The null is too great, the signal is degraded, and we end up not serving the area that this site is designed to serve. So that's, I'm just trying to, I know we went through this last time, I'm just trying to provide a little bit closer and more careful details so that you can see the difference there. And if you look at slides, let's see here, let's see. Okay. If you look at slide 15, you can see where we show the difference between the proposed site and the existing Crown Tower, which again is similarly situated as the Kiwanis Lodge too far south. And you can see the gap in coverage that exists along the full length of Lake Road that is the primary objective of this site. And that is why we said the site is too far south. And that is why the proposed Webster Park site, as proposed, is the location that we need in order to resolve problems, as mentioned in stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And my last question for the board is there anything else that the board is looking for with respect to Kiwanis? And if so, what? Especially given page 15, showing what the propagation looks like. What else specifically would you be looking for? And again, without waiving any rights under federal law with respect to the shot clock, we would provide that to the town. I don't know what else the board is looking for.
Yeah, Robert, can I make a suggestion? Because we can get to item 3 and 4 on the agenda, the regular town business, relatively quickly. Why don't we say that for then, and so we can actually get to the part of the agenda where it is discussion and the question, if you want to say that about
Tom?
So,
Tom, is it possible to ask a quick question of this gentleman, Mike?
I beg your
Can
pardon?
I ask a quick question of him?
Come on up, my friend.
You have 5 minutes. Hi, I'm Harper Zach, 530 Forest Lawn Road in Webster. I just have a question as far as your service.
Our town clerk didn't quite catch.
Oh, my name is Parker Zach, Z-A-C-K. I live at 530 Forest Lawn Road. And I have no cell service. It's abominable. And I'm a medical professional, my neighbors, anesthesiologists, we're on call, we can't get to the hospital, we don't even know. It's absolutely unacceptable. So that I think is already known. I think, I came here to argue that point. I think you already know that we need it desperately. My concern is, does that tower help us? My neighbor here also. We are west, you said east of Baker, is this what? Okay, so we're west of Baker, from Forest Lawn, or say Baker, from Baker west to Bay Road is no man's land. You can't place a call, you can't maintain, sustain calls, drop calls. I get welcome to Canada messages all the time. So that's the question. We would like to know what this is going to do for us.
Probably the closest, if you've gotten a copy of the
Yeah, we didn't have
application.
that, that's what I'm asking.
Okay, yeah.
Not privy to that.
And on page 10, it's showing these propagations, and maybe we could catch you offline, find out exactly where your house is on this, and then Mike can explain what the service levels are.
So
We're on the edge of the coverage. of
Yeah,
this.
he's east of Baker, so is that like drop dead point east of Baker, Baker Road? Beyond Baker, you're no longer improving service, or is it questionable, fuzzy, yes and no, sometimes yes, sometimes? And if not, is there something being done to improve the area from Baker going west and up Bay Road, which is a couple miles of no man's land?
It would be great if we could have a few minutes after, and we can look at it in a little closer detail and talk through it. We'd be happy to.
So you might not be aware of this additional
No, we're
concern?
very well aware.
Oh, okay, that makes, that's what I'm
We're
sure.
very well aware of it, but we're working on this particular project right this time. And we'd be happy to take a look exactly where you're at, see if there's any hope that this solution is going to solve that problem as well.
So you don't know off the top of your head if this will help west?
We can't tell from this map exactly where your house is, or where your
Well,
slide
but you
is.
said, you said Baker, so you said this would improve service.
Roughly from Baker, the primary
Right.
objectives for this site is Baker to Holt.
Okay, so this will not, Baker West, which
It
is.
doesn't mean that there's not going to be any overlap in service, but
Okay,
you're
guys.
in such a weak area that
Yeah, thank you, Barry.
you're in what we call a variable coverage area. So, like I said, we'd be happy to talk.
We can
about
discuss
it.
it later.
Okay,
Thank you. Just wanted clarification.
Yes, no, and I'm sure you can offline.
We will, absolutely.
I know this, so I like boots on the ground. Pellett at Lake. Pellett down to Whiting is about 1.1 mile. And I think Whiting down to Bay is another 1.1 mile. Because that's the way the county road project is broken up between this year and next. Does that sound about right, Barry? Okay. Forest Lawn, which as we know is right where that train bridge that we're having taken out, is that closer, Parker, to Whiting, or is it closer to Bay?
Closer to Bay.
Closer to Bay.
So the Bay and Lake is 2.2 miles away from the corner of Pellett and Lake. So you're a little less than 2 miles away. Is that correct? From Pellett and Lake. Okay. Maybe that'll help you when you have your offline conversation, Mike.
I'm sorry?
That might help you when you have your offline conversation. That Forest Lawn community, about 60 homes,
It's right there on the wall, that's our
is
community, right there.
essentially about 1.8 miles away from the corner of Pellett and Lake, where this tower is.
Right, so that's a little bit too far west for this site for the primary objectives. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be, you could be situated such that there's going to be some residual benefit, but it's not in, it's in what we call a variable coverage area. It's not part of the dedicated service for this site. It doesn't mean that we don't have other plans for that site, for that area in the future.
All right, and that's
Wrong meeting.
honestly why you guys
Do you
gotta
have
go
other
offline. For people watching at home, they hear, blah, 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 blah. If you're not at the podium, they don't hear a word. And there are more people actually watching this board meeting than are in this room, and we have to be sensitive to that. Please have that conversation offline, okay? Does anybody else want to get up at the podium? Should we order food, Barry?
You gotta stop asking the question. Once again, my name is Tom Roth, I'm from 800 Lake Road. My point was made on a couple of occasions, and I'll say it again. The town board is a steward of the town of Webster. It's a beautiful piece of property we're talking about there. It's adjacent to great areas that were left and preserved with the Genesee Valley Land Trust. And I'll tell you that this has been, without a doubt, the most frustrating process for anybody to understand. I've tried to break this down a million different ways, and I just heard tonight that it's the town's responsibility to find alternate spots if this one doesn't work. Intuitively, I have a hard time understanding why it's the town's responsibility to find a spot for private enterprise to get a tower to get more service. Intuitively, I find that as a problem. Now, I already can tell you what the answer is going to be. Well, it's public safety, and it's this, and it's that, it's a variety of other things. And that may well be true. I'm talking about a piece of property that's a gem. I've talked about it a long time. And I have been in that area for a while now, and I have not found the cell service to be a problem. Have there been times that I haven't gotten it? Yes. There's also been times when I haven't gotten it in other places too. The facts of the matter are, you're employed, you're voted, you're elected to the town for a purpose. And for me, today, at 8:50, that purpose is to maintain the integrity of this great town. And I find it frustrating, as I said at the beginning, of why we have to find a spot for Verizon. Now, if we do have to find a spot for Verizon, then put me on a task, I'll go try and find something. I've done a lot of things in my life. I haven't done this one, but I'll address it. I'm a guy who wants to get something done. I started this process early on with the planning board, and I was told to sit down and shut up because it's going to happen. I don't believe that. I don't believe it happens like that. And if it does, I'm terribly disappointed. But the point I'm making is obvious. We have a very special spot. And if the process is that we vote for a 125-foot tower to go adjacent to that special process, Tom Ross Lake will go on. This is not a hill I'm going to die on, but it is a hill that I'm going to take account of, and it's something that I'm going to remember for a while. So those are my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
And, by the way, full disclosure, Leo J. Roth is a huge customer of Verizon.
Thank you, Tom.
Lori Anderson, 810 Lake Road. I just want to add my support to both Andy and Tom for what they've said. I agree with Tom Roth in that it seems unusual that private citizens and this board should find a spot for Verizon. I want to remind the board that those 2 properties on Whiting Road, paperwork that was just submitted to show that they sent certified letters, all the information at previous meetings, and I've been at all of them, said that those were certified letters that were sent, but there was no reply. So again, referring to the number of properties that were looked at for this particular cell tower, those should not even count, in my opinion. Addressing this gentleman in Forest Lawn, that he does not have a cell tower. Mr. Cosby said that, well, we will be addressing that. So this is one of future cell towers. Driving along Lake Road, I noticed the one tower that's on Slocum, that's in Wayne County, that's similar to the tower that we're proposing for this Pellett Road site. I can't visually see any other cell towers to my knowledge while I'm driving, so I may have missed something. But this may be just the first link in a chain of cell towers, which is part of my concern. I do wonder what the future plans for Verizon is for this particular area. I do find it that, as Tom said, it is the town's responsibility to look ahead. Most of us are older here, and these towers will be here for many years past myself, and some of you who are with us tonight. We don't get these places back. They don't naturally go back to what they were. We have to really protect the areas that we have that are beautiful. Cell towers don't come and go. I think they'll be here to stay. And we might just find a picket fence of cell towers all along beautiful Lake Road, and I really hate to see that happen. Please be careful. This has been bounced from the board to the planning board. I was here at the first meeting when they said, don't worry, this is just step 1. We're not making a decision, it's going to the planning board. I went to the planning board meeting. Don't worry, this is just the beginning steps, it's going back to the board. So here we are. And I wouldn't say that no one's taking responsibility. It's just that these little steps are so small, they seem insignificant, or that they're not going to be, it's not the decision time yet. And it just pulls us all along this trail. And again, here we are. We don't know where it's going, but it's going to grow. I think that's obvious from tonight's meeting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I gotta ask you, Barry.
Don't do it.
Yes, I don't have to ask.
Nanette Phillips, 820 Lake Road, 27-year resident of Webster. I'm a physician, on call 24/7, 365. I have perfect cell phone service. I don't know why Verizon would like to put a cell phone tower at the end of my driveway, but I've never had any issues, and I think it's important to say that. I would also like to say that I think the explanation based on the exhibit E is somewhat of a conflation between the Crown Tower location and the potential Kiwanis location. And I still don't think that that explanation is clear as to why that's not an acceptable, albeit may not perfect by their standard, alternative to the location that would deface Lake Road. Thank you.
Thank you.
On our regular town business is potential motions, resolutions for a special use permit related to a proposal of a telecommunications tower at 833 Lake Road. And one after that is a motion, potential resolution for a height variance for the proposed 125-foot tall telecommunications tower at 833 Lake Road. Now, usually when I come to these, I always say, does the board have any questions or comments prior to me making the motion? Tonight, we had the rare opportunity to have about 40 minutes among 7 speakers that was maybe a lot of what would have come up in questions and comments from the board. However, I don't know if that encompassed the totality of what the board members had as questions. And I do want to seek some counsel from our town attorney, Charlie Genesi, on a couple of items here too. So, before I open it to the other board members, I will say this. After our public hearing on the 7th, which was of October, 2 weeks ago tonight, which I think, I don't know how many steps in the process between town board and planning board, but the town board first heard about this proposed tower on July 15th, so a little over 3 months ago. And I think it was Nanette or Laura who said, when she talked and said, don't worry, don't worry. I don't know if that was the exact words, but we did really home in on that night on July 15th. It became a pseudo-public hearing when you say very, even though it wasn't a public hearing. There is perception and there is process. And I understood the perception of the people that were against this tower that night. When I heard their stories, I understood that perception. But I also told them that night, it's for videotape and all that in these meetings, that there is a process. And I think that process has followed out, Town Attorney Genesi, exactly how it is supposed to, at least by law. Now the due diligence, which as Andy said, he's an accountant and I come from accounting, due diligence can have a subjectivity to it. One man's or person's perception, if you want to call it that, they did some thorough due diligence. Another person could say they mailed it in and were lazy. So I'm going to save all the things I've said at prior meetings of the due diligence that I think this town board has done in this process. That due diligence went right up to today. And when I looked at the notes and the open topics issues that I couldn't get my mind around, I asked 3 questions today to Attorney Bergdorf and to our staff, like Josh Artuzo. And those 3 questions were around, I think, 3 things that I think Attorney Bergdorf mentioned. 1, scenic byway. Now, scenic byway has been mentioned so many times in these meetings and in letters and in emails that I wake up at night, scenic byway, scenic byway. Josh Artuzo, I had asked if you could opine and find some information from the town of Ontario and when they went and put their tower in last year and what they found out or decided on scenic byway and how a tower on the, what I assume is the south side of Lake Road, is affected by the spirit and law, or whatever you want to say, of scenic byway. Do you have anything on that?
Yes, we spoke with the
engineer over at the town of Ontario regarding their process and their understanding. They provided us with some information that they collected when going through their process. And essentially, as the attorney mentioned earlier, the main intent of that program is allocating of federal funds and tourist development. It's to protect a scenic viewshed, and in the case of the Great Lakes Trail and this section of scenic byway, that resource is Lake Ontario, which is on the north side of Lake Road. And essentially, basically the Great Lake Seaway Trail, the one resource that's been identified in the plan is Webster Park. And this proposed site is approximately a mile to the east, or to the west of Webster Park. So that's the info that we obtained earlier this afternoon.
Okay. The second thing that I asked about, that I was still getting my mind around, because I got calls and I got emails and things on Kiwanis. What was the due diligence on Kiwanis? And I think that is already in 40 minutes of time been explained with Schedule E and the different items on that. I also, for full disclosure, Kiwanis, who must have gotten a similar letter to what the Bowens got at 833 Lake, what the people got at 370 Whiting. The people at Kiwanis were interested in negotiating a lease until it was found out that the site did not work, and thus there was no pursuit of that. Is that correct? Is that a good way to describe it, Attorney?
Yes, that is correct. The site acquisition person,
Okay.
yes, that is correct. The site acquisition person will go out with the search area and will look outside the search area. Sometimes you can stretch. And
Yeah.
then they will blanket that, get it back to the RF engineers, who will then review all of it. And the idea here is to do it in a pack like that, because time is always important.
Sure.
with getting
Okay.
stuff.
As was on October 7th, Mike Crosby from Verizon spoke at that time about the RF and all that at Kiwanis. To certain people, there wasn't enough sufficient evidence, documentation of a study or whatever that supported that. Mike has gotten up here tonight and gotten into more detail on Schedule E of the original submission package. I'm going to go back to what I said before. One person's incredible due diligence is another person's lazy way. I'm not here to determine, if you want to call it, what everybody's going to interpret that. One thing I will say about Kiwanis, and I will say it about the third item, which is the Whiting Road. If Kiwanis did work, or if the Whiting Road people responded and said, we want in, each of those locations abut our trail system and donated land from various families in this town. It's been brought up a lot in the last 3 months that it's a terrible thing that we would put a tower abutting these natural resources and these trails we have. Unless I'm missing something, every site that was looked at and proposed and gone to see if people were interested in putting it there and or if the RF worked, they all, that I know of, abutted either the Whiting Reserve or the Gosnell Reserve. Is that a correct statement? Once again, Attorney Burnout, or I
Yeah.
mean to...
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So now I go to the Whiting. As I think Nanette or Laura said in previous conversations here, there was no reply. Once again, a subjective term. There was a certified letter sent in 2016 to the owners of 370 and 380 Whiting. If people understand how certified letters work, they signed that they got the letter. They did not reply to what the letter said, which is very one-page, unequivocal in its interpretation. Are you interested in having a cell tower on your land? Would you like to talk to Verizon about negotiating that? One man's interpretation of due diligence and how to follow up in sales, if you want to call it, Tom, is another person's.
Don't bring me into this.
I'm just saying.
Don't bring me into this.
Okay. I think it's reasonable that if they did not reply to it, that is tantamount to them saying they're not interested. However, I got in my car today and I drove down to Whiting. And you're right, Barry. I'm not surprised when they build Whiting that it's kind of a compound feel. They got it fenced in. They don't, whatever. But that 370, 380 Whiting, which is on, I would say, the east side of Whiting. From Whiting to Lake, which is about 0.2 miles, I think there are 15 houses that count. So, and it abuts the Whiting Reserve. So that's what I looked into today.
Can I add something?
I'm done, actually.
I was very concerned as well that there was just no response from the Whiting Road residents. And I wanted to see something that said they didn't want it, I wanted something in writing. But when I looked at the letter that you brought tonight, the last sentence of that letter says that if we do not receive a reply, keep in mind that they did sign for the letter to receive it. It said if we do not receive a reply, we will assume that the answer is no. It couldn't be more clear. So I'm feeling a little bit better about that. I want to thank you for bringing that to us so that we can see that.
Are we open for discussion?
I'm done. I looked into my three things
Okay,
that
I
I
have couldn't a get my question.
head around.
Through all of this and through reading various articles and internet things and this and that, somewhere I think I saw something that said that the FCC can trump any decision we make here.
There are several layers of laws when it comes to cellular tower placement. I was involved actually in one in 1993, the Rosenberg case, and that's where we got the Court of Appeals, our highest court, puts state and federal law. On the state level, the courts deemed cellular towers public utilities for purposes of zoning. And what that means is that your usual special permit standards, your usual area variance standards, you're probably familiar with those, use variance standards, none of those apply. They get thrown out. Instead, the inquiry of the board at the state level is the town has to allow a facility that works from an RF standpoint. However, that doesn't mean that the town can't suggest, can you go here, can you go there, and if it still works, and we can move there because the land is available without unreasonable cost or unreasonable delay, and it's not wetlands, so it's constructible, we have to move. So that's the give and take. Can't say no, it's got to be within the area that works, but within that, the town can help direct other places. And this company, there's no hidden agenda. If it works, and those without unreasonable cost or unreasonable delay, we moved it. So that's the federal level. So the typical standards don't apply to the balancing standards. And on a federal level, the 1996 Telecom Act came out. And it basically said you can't, a whole host of additional impositions, if you will, on local government. Again, you can't say no, you can't treat providers differently. You can't say, well, AT&T's got service, so you don't need it, Verizon. There's a whole bunch of things. And then there's been regulations fairly recently of the shot clock because towns were taking too long. So they wouldn't say no, they wouldn't say yes, and things went on and on. So the FCC put in certain shot clock requirements depending on whether it's co-location or new tower. In this case, new tower, it's 150 days. And there are other laws as well. But the usual laws that apply, the usual standards that you're so familiar with in zoning are not the ones that are applicable here. This is 30 years worth of case law that has been, and statutory law that's been built up in order to get this essential service deployed rapidly and properly.
Okay, one other question is that my understanding from everything that Mike has said and going through this, through your proposal here several times, that this is really a tower that is going to really affect a very small area. It's specific to this area. That tower needs to be there to handle this area.
Yeah, and maybe I didn't explain that well enough last time, but to be real clear, the reason it's called cellular is think of a honeycomb grid. These things don't boom all over. They've got to fit within that cell and not go beyond the cell because then they interfere, but they need to cover that cell.
So, and I was just leading into, stating that I understand that, I was leading into this question. What brought you to the decision to build a tower here? Was there a great outcry for service in this area?
Oh, this particular cell.
Yeah, for this particular, so
yeah.
what made you decide to come build a tower?
Yeah, well, under the FCC license, the company has to get adequate service to its entire licensed area or it risks losing its license. So it does have to get it to all the places.
What has taken so long? This was for as long as I can remember, since cell phones have been active, I've heard the various emergency service people, police, ambulance, fire, and all that say that there's no service on Lake Road. Why all of a sudden?
Resources. For 30 years, I have been doing almost nothing but building out cell towers. Week after week after week, and we're still at it. It's simply a matter of resources. And some of the decisions, and Mike will know this better, some of the decisions have to do with level of service, has to do with what they call POPs, it's population density and so forth. There's a whole bunch of reasons as to what gets ranked, but eventually the intent and the requirement is to get to every place. Why this one now? Why was it sooner?
You're building this tower is because of a requirement by the government to do so.
You know, under FCC license, yeah, we have got to cover, Mike,
Yeah, that's certainly part of the reason, but your question regarding the specific location and why now is driven by the demand on the network. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of areas we'd like to improve coverage, but why not this one or why not that one? We're driven by the demand on the network. So if you're taking a look in this our justification document, you can see that we included traffic insurance. And those show overloaded sites in the area, for example, Plum Road. When we look, we have access, we can see where the traffic is being generated from. Traffic meaning the calls in the network, the drops, the port throughput, all the things that our customers are experiencing. We can identify and prioritize where those areas are. This is that next spot that we need to be in to fix the next biggest problem in the network. So you brought up Lake Road. I know Lake Road, it's been problems along Lake Road. It's partially due to the terrain, partially due to the proximity to what we call the Canadian border from an RF standpoint. And we're working, just like you see the site that's gone up out in Ontario. We've done Centenary Shores recently. We're working to fortify all the way along that lake area where we're having these issues. So this isn't the only one, but it is one of several. And one of the things that was mentioned before is a picket fence site. It's not a picket fence. We're building these sites right, and we're trying to get the right amount of service out of them and still have those fit into the area. And I would offer that I believe that this is a very modest site for the area, especially relative to a lot of the other sites that are in town, some of which, like at the bus garage near Willing, we're at 195, 196 feet on that site. There's a tower at Holt Road and Plum Road at the church. It's 170 feet tall. It's got red and white. It's got lights on the top, guy wires. That's right in the middle of a residential area. This is an orchard, backed up to the woods in a relatively large parcel. This is a really ideal location relative to a lot of situations we get ourselves in where the service is needed. This is relatively a good situation from a land use standpoint. So for us, it allows us to be in the position we need to be to serve that area that's putting demand, both from poor performance that the existing customers are having, and also the overloaded demand centered on a weak area. So this is the type of spot that we need to be in order to fix that problem.
One more question real quick. This isn't about whether you should build it or not. I just had a question looking at this. Your utilities are outside the fenced area.
That is not my department, I apologize.
So your transformer and your electrical box is outside the outside the fenced-in area. Why is that?
I think it's for access to a utility company, but I can double check that, I don't know.
It just seemed odd to me.
Yeah, the equipment shelters are typically inside. So I
Yes,
don't know
the
if there's a
equipment,
meter on
Verizon's
it. There could be a
equipment
meter on
pad
the outside.
is inside, yeah.
There may be a meter on the outside, the equipment is on the inside.
It's a transformer, I think it said.
Well, I think that the utility companies require the transformers to be more accessible.
Okay, that's one point I was wondering, never mind. We're good.
That makes sense.
I've got a question for Mr. Burdoff. In regard to the federal legislation, which is voluminous, the consideration that this being utility, we're limited in the standards that we can impose. Does that apply also to the variance for the height?
Yes, it's that
In
particular.
your opinion?
It's not in my opinion, there's case law, and it's state law, though. That's not the federal so much. There is an element of that for the federal law, but that particular, the change in the standards is primarily the Rosenberg case and the cases that were cited, that were developed since then. And Rosenberg was in 93, I believe. And that's the one that imposed the public utility standard. And there are a lot of public utility cases, a lot of cell tower ones since 93, but also other ones, other public utility cases for zoning, before and after the Rosenberg case in 93. And that talks about exactly that.
But what if you came in and you wanted a 200-foot tower? You're saying that the town could not
Yes.
oppose that, could not stop it? Could not deny a variance?
You could not deny that variance if the utility came in and proved the need. So if we came in and showed the network, showed the other cells around it, showed that we needed to have 200 feet in order to fill the cell, in order for the network to work properly, then the answer is no. If, on the other hand, there was another solution, without a reasonable cost and reasonable length, then we would have to go to them. But
So
sure,
we can still apply standards.
you can, not the area variance standard. And we showed we meet those anyway, but it's not the area variance standard. The standard, you can apply a standard. The standard is one of need. And that's what Rosenberg says, and all the other public utility cases. Is in this instance, the standard that has to be applied is one of need. Does the utility reasonably need it in order to provide a safe and effective service? And that's what Exhibit E is. That's what the network is, showing the different cells and so forth. But we have gone to many towns where we've had to have a 250-foot tower, a 300-foot tower in the old days, and the height variances had to be.
My concern is the standards we have for the variance, whether we can get into the standards for the granting of special use. The standards are 9524B, which you alluded to in your papers. They're very similar to standard zoning. So you're saying that those are no longer valid?
For this, what we always do is we show that we meet the traditional standard because we just always have done that. To give towns a comfort level, we also meet the traditional standards. However, if we fail to meet the traditional standards, or you don't even have to look at the traditional standards, Rosenberg supplants the traditional standards for utilities, including cell towers. And it's very settled law against it since 1993 in New York State. Federal law does a whole bunch of other things as well, but that particular question is primarily New York State law.
In your experience, do other towns have similar standards for variances for cell towers?
A lot of them will refer to the typical area variance standards, yes. A lot of them will refer to the typical special permit standards, and so we show that we comply with those. A lot of them are modified for cell towers, and they're legitimate questions as well. It's not like we can just avoid all regulations. So, for instance, if a town says, look, we want fencing, we want to have landscape, you should try to co-locate, show us, it goes back to show us you can't co-locate, because you can co-locate on something to avoid the tower, then you don't need the tower. So there are standards like that, but they, except for like the site plan type ones, landscape and so forth, the big ones, the height variance, where and how tall, that all is.
My concern obviously is whether or not our legislation is obsolete. That's my concern. Because the legislation of most of the municipalities due to the Rosenberg and the following cases.
Yet very few incorporate Rosenberg directly into the ordinance. And very few ordinances across the state that I can think of would have that. But that's law. And
I didn't draft this particular, this one was in existence
Yeah.
before I got here, and I've been here a long time, so it's been around a while.
You know, in terms of height, I mean, it's, one engineer used to say, look, it's gotta be just tall enough to reach the ground. And that's because it's gotta be a particular height. Remember that flashlight, it comes up, and you don't want it too tall either. If it's gonna interfere, it's gotta come down that coverage footprint that flashlight comes in. So again, the question is, it's gotta be built to the height that's needed, and there is no advantage or reason for the company to build it taller than is necessary in order to get to the edge of the cell. If they build it taller, it's not gonna help. In fact, it's gonna hurt, because it'll interfere with neighboring cells. So it's gotta be tall enough, and yet not too tall.
Thank you.
Patty, Andrew,
I don't have any further questions.
John? Okay, then Charlie, if that is the only one.
Let me just explain.
Yeah, please do.
All right,
Standards?
I prepared it's really, I'll call it sort of a bare bones resolution. In favor of granting it, if that's what we want for the board. If you don't, it's not, there's no issue. Just to follow. But I set forth all the various meetings, the various approvals, the publications, et cetera, in the resolution. Basically, what the resolution states is that after the public hearing and after the planning board's positive recommendation, the board, and also under secrets too, that the town board would grant it based on the criteria set forth in our chapter 95, particularly 95.12. I included a paragraph if you want to do this, if you are inclined to do it. Also granting a variance within the resolution. I did that because in the past, we haven't had a lot of these. We did have one.
Talking the height variance?
The height variance. We had one that actually involved it on town land, the Parks and Rec Center. We did that, there was a little controversy, however, in that particular. There was a higher, there was actually a larger, it was under the 50-foot tower. So, what I'm saying to the board is that if you are inclined to grant a special use permit, you have a resolution. You can include the variance if you wish, or you can do a separate one.
Okay.
And
Last Thursday night, at a town board workshop, the deputy supervisor Patel oversaw. One of the topics of discussion was, I think this concept that Attorney Berga came up with, the shot clock. And if I understand it correctly, a new tower, the shot clock is 150 days from formal application, but changes to an existing tower are 60 days, is that correct?
It's 60 or 90, depending, but
Okay.
most co-locations are 90, some are 60, under 64 or
Right,
90, some are 150.
Okay, and last Thursday night, and Josh, Patty, the board members were here, because I tuned into that workshop, Facebook Live, but I came in after that discussion. I think that was about the shot clock on existing towers here in town, is that correct, Josh? And
Yes,
Patty?
that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, and I believe future. Or not,
No, existing.
just existing.
But, so that was, and Josh, before that workshop, the concept of the shot clock, that was the first time I had heard it, and we really, because of the workshop discussion, it was about some existing towers here in town, that there were modifications that wanted to be made, and in more words or less, we had heard from, the applicant, whatever, don't forget, you got 60 days. You can't kick this can down the road. Is that essentially what we're talking, right?
Yes, it's called an eligible facilities request.
Okay.
And it applies to existing towers.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that that applies to towers being built in the future?
The new ones we heard tonight has 150 days
To be
shot
built,
clock
to be built.
to be decided on from application
Yes, but
date.
if it should need some sort of change in 5-10 years.
The 60
That
days.
is
Like, there's really three different levels to shot clock. There are eligible facility requests under 6409, relatively recent, and that's where you're going on basically modifications, you're not increasing the height, things like, really the easiest ones. And those actually cannot be turned down. And it just flat out cannot turn them down. And then when we've got a new co-location or a new tower, they are 90 days and 150 days respectively, from time of application to conclusion.
That answers my question, thank you.
Yeah, and you might as well stay up there. I don't want you. You got your 10,000 steps in yet? So this 150 days, I think you said earlier, because of the date of the formal application here, it's November 9th.
Yes.
So if that's accurate, all right, and I have no reason to not believe it is, we can do a couple of things here. One, we're missing a board member. I don't know if that board member will be able to be back present for the November 4th town board hearing, which is still within the 150 days. We could take 2 more weeks to maybe, we've got, there's a lot of stuff that has been dumped previous on us, and there's some other things that are now in front of us that if the board has some more questions and would be more comfortable either A, with a full board voting on a resolution about this, and or would like to get some more information, we could do this November 4th. However, we could do this tonight. Because one thing I want to go on record, if we decide to move this to November 4th, and correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney Genesi, there is nothing that says in our agendas by law that we have to put in an agenda item that says you get 5 minutes at the podium. Is that correct?
There's nothing that says we have to, or?
Correct.
Yes.
We do that as a courtesy. All right? I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not putting on the agenda on November 4th 5 minutes at the podium. Because I do not want another hour and a half on this. If the board decides that they want 2 more weeks to ask a few more questions, to have Attorney Genesi have some more time to look at federal law, standards, this, that, talk, all that, understand this, when we come here on November 4th, it will be tight. It will not be 40 minutes of speakers, and we will go then. Because I also want to understand at that point, what happens on November 10th, on the day 151, if this board doesn't make a decision. Do you know the answer to that, Attorney?
I want to hear from Mr. Burke.
It goes to federal court, and the federal judge grants the permit, essentially. We bring a lawsuit to federal court.
No way to get rid of it, is it?
Well, how do you?
So,
No,
I just want to comment on
Go ahead, Jen.
your statement where you said that if we push this out 2 weeks, that the public will not be allowed to speak on this topic.
The public hearing closed on this, Jen, 2 weeks
I
ago.
understand that.
It did.
I want to comment for a second. So, we all have an opportunity to do more additional research should we push this off 2 weeks. Well, I would presume that perhaps the people that live in that direct area that will be directly impacted by the cell tower, they'd be doing some additional research too, and they have some additional questions. So by prohibiting them from speaking during the typical public portion for 5 minutes, in my opinion, I don't think that's fair. That's how I feel on that subject. That's from one board, that's all.
And you know I respect your opinion on that.
Yep, just wanted to voice it.
And I would say this, if the people that are not for this come up with some documentation, new evidence, and not just getting up there, and I don't mean to be rude on this, but saying the same thing for the 5th straight time in a meeting, I'm not interested in that. And I don't mean to be crass or anything, I'm not interested in that. If there's new evidence, you have some talented people. Marie's not here, she's a paralegal. Andy, you're talented. Tom, you're talented. We have a doctor. If you have new evidence that the board needs to consider on a decision, if we don't do that tonight, I would suggest you get that documentation to us.
What evidence could they possibly come up with other than another site?
Barry, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that.
I feel kind of bad because Ms. Anderson had said that she felt like this whole process, that we were pulling them along on the trail of this. And we've lengthened this trail in order to do our due diligence and to hear from everyone and really carefully examine this. So should we decide to put this off till November 4th, I don't want you to think we're still pulling you along on the trail. It's because we're trying to uncover everything we possibly can to make what is going to be a very difficult decision.
I'd like to say
I
something.
don't see where
No,
there's anything else to
no,
discuss.
this is not a public hearing. I gotta
It is a
have,
public
I gotta keep some, you know.
1 minute.
Let's put it this way.
1 minute.
No, Tom,
This,
no, you have
you
to
asked
sit
about
down.
pulling me along.
You know what?
This whole thing's been pulled along because it's federal anyway. What's the difference?
Yeah.
Okay.
What is the absolute difference? It's just been a waste of everybody's time. For God's sakes.
That's why I asked the question.
I agree with you, Barry. There's no reason to talk anymore. It's done. We're not done.
Because we have 4 board members tonight,
Good night.
what is what happens if we vote tonight and it's 2-2?
Then it fails, it's not, you won't have, the permit is not granted. You need 3 members, you need 3.
Well, and this is the thing. We have done a lot of due diligence on this. We've spent a lot of time on this. You know, some people perceive it as dragging along. I can't, if we're gonna do this the right way, I gotta tell you something. I need 5 voting members. I need 5 voting members.
You may not have 5 on the 4th. You can't promise that Bill's gonna be here.
You make a good point, Barry.
I don't think Bill has any intention of coming back here before Christmas.
In all fairness, we need to let everyone know he's out on a surgical.
Right, yes, he's out, he just had to be replaced this past week.
Yes.
You know what?
We have to vote the table anyways.
Okay, so Supervisor Flaherty is making a motion, a resolution of the Webster Town Board granting special use permit for a communication tower at 833 Lake Road and a height variance of 125 feet for said tower. At a regular board meeting of the Webster Town Board of the Town of Webster, Monroe County, New York, held at the Town Board Meeting Room at 1002 Ridge Road in the town of Webster, New York, on the 21st day of October 2021 at 7:30 p.m. were present Supervisor Thomas Flaherty, Councilman Barry A. Dean, Councilwoman Patricia T. Cataldi, Councilman John J. Cahill. The following resolution was offered by Supervisor Flaherty. Whereas Blue Sky Towers 3 LLC and Valley Atlantic Mobile Systems LLC, 352 Park Street, Suite 106, North Reading, Massachusetts 01840, seek to construct and operate a wireless communications tower at 833 Lake Road in the town of Webster. And whereas specifically a 125-foot tall communication tower is being requested for the property at 833 Lake Road in the town of Webster to remedy the service deficiencies as set forth in the applicant's site plan analysis as attached to its application. And whereas this project was initially before the town board at its regular board meeting of July 15, 2021, at which meeting the town board referred the application to the planning board for special use permit and site plan review. And whereas the affected lands are in a large lot, single-family residential district, and whereas the code of the town of Webster, chapter 95, required the town board to send a referral to the planning board for this project for the planning board's review and recommendations regarding the issuance of a special use permit and site plan approval. And whereas pursuant to the Webster Town Code, chapter 95, a communications tower is a permitted use in a large lot, single-family residential district upon issuance of a special use permit by the town board. And whereas the concept plan and application have been received by the town board, and whereas Webster Town Code section 95-11 subchapter B requires site plan approval by the planning board under Webster Town Code chapter 228 article 4, and whereas the town board referred said application to the town of Webster Planning Board for its review and recommendation by its resolution of July 15, 2021, whereas it is the planning board did complete its review and issue its determination on August 17, 2021, and whereas the town board by resolution of September 16, 2021 scheduled a public hearing to be held on October 7, 2021 to consider the above application, and whereas the notice of public hearing was published in the Webster Herald on September 22, 2021 and was posted on the town bulletin board at 1000 Ridge Road, Webster, New York, and on the town website and social media platforms. And whereas an environmental assessment form has been received and reviewed by the town board prior to its July 15, 2021 meeting. And whereas the members of the public were heard in regard to this proposal for a special permit at the town board's regular meeting of October 7, 2021. And whereas the planning board by its resolution of August 17, 2021 submitted a report of its findings to the town board and made positive recommendation for a request of the applicant to the town board. And whereas the town board has received and reviewed the environmental assessment form, now therefore be it resolved that the proposed action is a type 2 action on the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act, known as SEQR, that the town board of Webster has assessed the potential environmental significance of the proposed action, and the same will not have a significant impact on the environment based on criteria established by the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEQR, and regulations thereto. As such, the town board of the town of Webster has determined its specific action herein as precluding further review under SEQR. 3. Sufficient reason appearing therefore the requirement of the Webster Town Code section 95-10 that the maximum height of this communication tower of 100 feet be permitted of this tower to extend 125 feet in height. 4. Sufficient reason appearing therefore the requirement of the Webster Town Code section 95-12 subsection D2 that a monopole or guided tower instead of a freestanding communications tower be used, permitting this tower to be freestanding. 5, the town board finds and determines that the proposed communication tower meets the requirements and standards of the Code of the Town of Webster, section 95-12, for the issuance of a special use permit and thus grants a special use permit subject to the conditions and dimensional requirements set forth by the planning board as set forth in the letter to the planning board dated August 17, 2021. That is my motion.
Second.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilman Dean?
This has been a really difficult decision for me because I do see the need for the tower in the area because it's always been needed all up and down the Lake Road. But I've seen no support. In all of these meetings, I've seen no support for this pole. Nobody's come forward and stood up and said, we need it, other than you. But you live down the other end of the road. I just haven't seen it. But I know if we vote this down, we're just going to end up in court. Aye.
Councilman Cahill?
Nay.
Councilwoman Conley? I would agree with Councilman Lee that this is a very difficult decision. I will say that I did receive 2 emails from residents on Lake Road who told me that they wanted it. Now, unfortunately, those people don't come to the meetings. We don't hear from them, but I did get emails from them. So Barry, I did hear from a couple residents. I certainly understand the residents' concerns who live in that area. I'm not sure if you noticed, but I came down Lake Road today and I actually spent quite a bit of time sitting in front of your homes and looking across at the property.
Yes,
And I drove all around. And, you know, I understand why you don't want it there. Can't say that I blame you. But I also look at where we are in today's world and that people are getting rid of their landlines. People are more and more relying on their mobile carriers. We live in a different world than we did before, maybe even 10 years ago. And I don't come upon this decision easily, but
I'm glad that Barry and Patty gave some elaboration on their I. I was so quenched or whatever from reading the resolution. There's been so much said since July 15th at one of the meetings, and I don't remember which one, I did tell everybody, I went to 40 houses within a half a mile east and west of Lake and Pellett, and I went south on Pellett a half a mile to Shangri-La and talked. Well, I went to 40 houses. I did not go to your house. I did not go to your house. I knew how you felt. The houses I went to, and I think it's in the record, there were several people that were very much for this. So Barry, I appreciate they didn't come in,
Right.
you know, but I also would say, unfortunately, and this is something that has frustrated me about being in government after private business, is that the people that do come forward, and God bless you, are the ones that are against things. The people that are for things usually don't come out and pass. Patty, you've been on the board a dozen years, Barry, you have been. Is that essentially how it usually goes?
Yeah, a lot of the time,
Just
you
so.
know, neighbors don't want to get into it with their own neighbors.
That was said to me indoors. I want it, but I also don't want to have a Hatfield and Boyce situation, an actual line.
So we passed it.
Okay,